Nightly Musers, followers of the pod, faithful few and hopeful many, this is Anchor by Spotify. If you haven't heard about it, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's the very platform that allows me to give you what I give you on the nightly. So let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And it gives you the ability to distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally FREE free. So here's where you come in. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That is ANCHOR.fm to get started. Thank you very much. Peace. Welcome to the Nightly Muse podcast. This is your host, Tinayeshe. This has been an interesting day because I've recorded episodes in now, I guess, 2 different places that I never have recorded them before. And it's been an interesting process for the day. So, shout out Lowfly Productions. LOFLY. He's that guy. He's my guy. Super thankful and happy to get rolling. So let's do it. I have been having these conversations with people. Surprise, I don't only talk to myself. I've been having these conversations with people about some dreams that I have, and Christian education is something that has greatly impacted my life for the better. Went to Charlotte Christian, went to Brookstone Schools, school that my dad started, and really learned a lot. And I mean, I attribute my alma mater to being the place where I realized a true need for Jesus, and not just a head and heart knowledge of what he's done for me, but truly a need and a reliance on Jesus and the work that he did on the cross. And so, yeah, and, you know, the academic part of it, obviously, but the faith and the relationships with teachers and all of the things that I got from there have helped me become who I am today. And for that, I say thank you. I have learned that I think I have pretty, I wouldn't call them radical views, but pretty, I don't know. I dream one day about becoming a spiritual life director at a school, in part because I have ideas that are a little different than what I see in terms of how schools are run in a faith-related context. And I actually had a really good conversation with an employee where they were explaining kind of the other side of kind of the rebuttal of some of my views, which was really healthy. But, you know, Christianity is an interesting thing. I mean, religion in general, right? We believe, and specifically with our faith, that we choose to follow Jesus. It's a choice to become a Christian. And a lot of times in that culture, growing up a pastor's kid, then in Christian education, there's so many things that are set in place that are structured. Being an athlete, specifically playing football, I was, for the most part, in good shape because I played sports throughout high school. Most years it was 3 sports, and except for my senior year, and which is wild. Yeah, from 8th grade to junior year, I was a 3-sport athlete. And there's a regiment there. As soon as, the school year ended, we had like a week before football conditioning started, going into my freshman year. I remember I lost 20 pounds that summer, just from doing conditioning 3 days a week, eating pretty well. But again, you get the structure of being a regimented, disciplined athlete. And getting out of that framework, I realized, I really only worked out when I had to. And it wasn't a bad thing. I had weight training, I did the off-season workouts, but as a result, it was always kind of incentivized or negatively reinforced that, voluntary workouts were voluntary with quotations. There was no missing off-season workouts unless I was doing another sport, which sometimes was difficult. And so I learned the habit of working out by necessity or by proxy of being on a team. And so getting out of that framework made working out hard because I was only used to working out with teammates. I was only used to working out with the spotter. I was only used to going to the gym because going to the gym or going to workouts meant getting a chance to play, and not going meant I wouldn't play or I wouldn't be on the team, etc. And so I kind of view faith the same way. My whole life, this is a good thing, but there was no skipping church. For 20 years of my life, I went to the same church every Sunday, and the only time we didn't go to church was if we were on vacation. And even then, I never visited another church until I had friends that had special occasions, like my friend going to get baptized or sharing their testimony. And that was, I think, only in college. If I did, it was a project that I had to do in high school, or us visiting family and us going to their church. There was no skipping church, yet alone there was no going to other churches. That didn't start until I was, again, a junior in college, 20 years old. So for 2 decades, that was my life. From 5th grade to my senior year, 8 years, really from 2nd grade to, so that's, 11 years? Yeah, 3 more years. I had a Christian education, so there was no missing chapel. There was no missing convocation or whatever. We had Bible class, which I think is necessary if you're at a Christian school. It's part of the curriculum. But for better or for worse, doubt, struggle, I don't necessarily know if we had the best conversations and when it pertained to the other end of it, of not believing, of having questions, about your sexuality or abortion or, the hot topic issues that we talk about today, that are at the forefront of society. There was always division in terms of this is what the Christians believe, this is what the world believes. And as the gray, I guess, became more apparent, things got interesting. Trump election, all of that, Obama's presidency, just tense times where we're starting to really reevaluate like all of our stances and the conflation of religion and politics and all of these things. But anyway, back to the point. The first time, really, where I was somewhere that Christianity was not the status quo was in college at UNC Charlotte. Go Niners. That was the first time that I was like in like where I met and was like friendly and friends with like an openly gay person. Like I was in a bubble, like, and it was a protective bubble. There's necessary things that come with that, good that comes with that. But then you step out into the real world, the real world. And, I would say the argument there is the real world is what God calls us to, and we're living the broken version of it. But, in this framework, right, the dominant culture, I am engaging with it for the first time. And there's this thing called apologetics. It's a defending of the faith. And I remember, I think, going into the world thinking, man, there's this really cheesy Christian movie called God's Not Dead, where the professor says all this stuff about, God being dead, and the student decides to basically debate the professor and all this stuff. And to an extent, I think I imagined that this would be like the Kennedy versus the world. Like, I'm going to find myself in a classroom where things are being said that I don't believe in, and it's on me to stand up and say that it's false. And, anyway. But I do remember, to some of my teachers' credit, sitting in my psychology class, and one of my favorite professors, Dr. Albert Maisto, what a guy. Great head of hair. Just solid dude. Funny guy. And I would sit in the front of the class because I was trying to be like in it. And sometimes I'd sit in the front and still fall asleep. And he was just a nice dude. Very approachable, very chill, not like, he didn't have like a superiority complex or whatever. Like, he was just a all-around good dude. But he would say some things that I just did not believe. I mean, within a week or two, he had basically attacked every spiritual phenomena that I believed in and attributed it to a biological answer and a scientific biological response. The chill that you get down your back, your soul, that's just your hippocampus or your amygdala. Like, all of these things that we attribute to faith, he said, is just science. And it was very interesting. And it was like, whoa, this actually happens. And I didn't feel myself being convinced or swayed, but it was kind of a shell shock moment. But then as I got deeper and deeper into college, deeper and deeper into friendship with non-believers, and currently as my life has put me in places where non-believers exist more and more, I found that even in my own life, as a minority, as a person who I don't need a debate. I don't want to debate, but I do want to be heard. I do want to be seen, and I do want to be cared for. This is me as a black person. This is me as a son. This is me as a friend, as a human. I mean, as a Christian, sometimes the main question I ask is why. But in reality, I just want to feel that God sees me, that he hears me, that he knows me, and actually understands and feels my pain. I read a book, and I'm going to have a separate episode about this, but in Narnia, there's this passage where Diggory, I think, is the character. His mom is sick, and he goes, or his grandmother, his primary caretaker is sick, and Aslan, main character, the God figure, is tasking him with something, and he doesn't want to be selfish and ask him kind of in a transactional way to fix his situation. But eventually the news comes out, and Aslan starts to cry. And Diggory says in the book, it was as if he was grieving more, I think it was sadder, like he was more sad than Diggory was about Diggory's own situation. And I immediately started tearing up. And just that image of God actually caring and feeling, empathizing to the extent where he feels our pain more than we feel it, was just mind-boggling, but felt so real and so true. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I completely went away from the dream that I had, I want to create a space where kids have the opportunity to exercise or practice the act of choosing Jesus. You know, we go on these retreats, we go to chapel, we do these things, and they're all forced. Whether or not you're growing up in a Christian home, like most of the time, you know, you got a bratty teen who doesn't want to go to church, they have to go, right? And you're fighting, and I get it. You're growing up in my house, you're growing up in the household, you have to go to church because that's what we do. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but at the same time, like, at what point are we learning that Jesus is somebody that we have to choose, that he's a perfect gentleman that knocks on the door and does not barge his way in, but only comes in when we open it and allow him to enter our hearts and our lives? Where is that? Where is that practice outside of saying, like, if you choose to follow Jesus, and having those like weird, semi-awkward, emotional altar call, like stand-up moments where we like confess that we've become a Christian? Like, when do we actually practice the act of choosing Jesus in our everyday lives and situations? I have to choose to read my Bible. I have to choose to go to church. Well, currently I'm contractually obligated to go to church because I work for the church. But like before that, I remember there was a day my sophomore year, I was at a church, things weren't really going well, and I just was not feeling it. I woke up, looked at the clock or the alarm clock, I was hitting it on snooze, looked at the time, I wasn't serving that week, and I was like, I don't want to go. I do not want to go. And to be honest with y'all, the only reason I went was because it's something I'd done my entire life. And I knew that if my mom called me, because she usually called me on Sundays to ask me how church was, if she called me and asked me how church was, I wasn't going to be able to lie to her, but I also wasn't going to have a good reason for why I didn't go. And so I went. I didn't go because I wanted to. I didn't go for Jesus. I didn't go for the Lord. I went because it is what I've done my whole life. And that was the day that I knew that I needed to leave that church. And I guess my fear is, and not to toot my own horn, but for the most part, like, I'm working for the church now. Like, I didn't really like depart from the faith ever. And, you know, if somebody who's kind of been in it his whole life and stuck in it his whole life has that moment of what's the point? I'm only going here because it's what I do. Like, what about the person who hasn't grown up that way, who has that crisis of conscience or whatever? Like, I want to create an environment where the bubble, practice. I'm a coach, if you couldn't tell. Practice is the place that you make mistakes so that when the game comes, you don't make the same mistakes. You do homework and you mess up on your homework so that as you get better and you get more homework, when the quiz comes, you mess up on the quiz, you improve. When the second quiz comes, you do better. Then when the test comes, hopefully you've made the mistakes previously to improve so that when the test comes, you actually do better. That's why the test is weighted more. And so you don't want to mess up in the game. You want to mess up in practice. You want to get the rearing, the correction, the space to fail in practice so that hopefully you don't fall on your face in the game. And sometimes it feels like in Christian culture, we do the opposite. We're trained to be perfect, right? 24/7 rule. If you went to Charlotte Christian, you know what that is. It's not a bad thing, it's conduct, but at the same time, we're held to this standard in the bubble that when we get out of it, when the safety is gone and you make those same mistakes, there's nobody to tell you no. There's nobody to tell you that, sex outside of marriage has negative consequences. There's nobody to tell you the things that we believe to be true. And the wolves are going to eat you alive and spit you out. And we say that, but we don't I'm not saying you have to fail. I'm not saying yes, you can learn from other people's mistakes, but at the same time, within that framework, home is where you want to mess up so that when you're on your own, you don't make the same mistakes. Protection is where you want to have the safety to fall so that you don't get the brakes beaten off of you when you're by yourself, because then who's going to help you? And so I want to make a place. I want to be a part of a place or create. And one of the conversations was, okay, well, you're telling me a freshman has the capacity to choose? And I'm like, well, yes, the rebuttal to that. And in that moment, it was a good rebuttal. In certain instances, people aren't necessarily responsible enough to do what's best for them. And so you create a framework where they're forced to do what's best for them because they may not be responsible enough to do it. That's true. But also, if we're saying that they're young enough to choose Jesus to have a relationship with him, then maybe they should be young enough to choose within that framework, do I go to chapel or not? And there to not be a penalty for it. And in the same sense that God isn't forcing us to go to church. He wants us to. We should. We ought to. There's directives. Don't neglect the gathering of the saints. Where 2 or 3 or more are gathered in my name, I'm with them. There's scripture that shows that there are benefits and good things that come with that. But it's a choice. Sin is a choice. Obedience and holiness and righteousness is a choice. And I don't know, nightly musers. This one is a little more nightly with a K, if you understand what I'm saying. Because I'm thinking about my old high school. But my radical view is that I used to think that Christian schools shouldn't have an expulsion policy, because if we're actually about restorative, justice, then this should be the place where we want those kids that are completely defiant, because we should keep pursuing them. Those are the people that we should want even more. That one was a little radical, but at the same time, I've just always had these thoughts about what do we do? What are we believing in? What are we allowing ourselves to do that helps us when we get out say like, no, I've done the deed of choosing Jesus. I have gone to chapel on my own volition. I've lifted up my hands in worship because I wanted to and because I felt pushed to by my own heart. And so that is why I go to church today when I have the option, when it's fully my choice. Like, even the retreats, I'm like, man, what if those were optional? And now all the people that went are people who decided to go and they had the experience with Jesus. And all the people that decided not to go, when they come back and hear the testimonials, they hear like, man, something happened there and I want to be a part of that. And then next year they go. You know what I mean? Like, I find myself thinking about the apologetics and the things that I learned. And yes, like, I think those are valuable, but I don't think I found myself in a position where I had to defend the faith. I found myself more in positions where I had to listen to people and care for them. There was a moment where my suite mate sat in my room in tears and just needed a friend. And I was able to impart truth his way. And I think the benefit of apologetics, the benefit of being reared up in truth, was that I was prepared not necessarily to defend the faith, but to provide truth in situations where that was necessary, using the context of that situation to point to a truth that I learned in those apologetics classes, in those Old Testament, New Testament Bible classes that I learned who God was, what he's about, and what I actually believe in. I was able to provide that context into the situation and that truth into the context of the situation. And I just feel like, I think I'm having two different conversations right now. One, Jesus is something that I feel like we should be learning how to choose, because I'm struggling with that today. Two, more than I want to debate people like my Twitter Fingers episode, I want to listen to people and I want to be listened to. Not in the sense that I want a echo chamber of yes men and yes women. No. But I want to be seen, I want to be heard, and I want to be cared for. And my non-believing friends, where I do end up having God-centered, gospel-centered conversations, seem to allow that when they feel seen, heard, and cared for. So this is 26 minutes long, and I hope that some of this makes sense, because I feel like I just rambled about two different topics at once. But I feel like you're catching my drift, and I gotta go. So thank you for listening to my 27-minute soapbox. Maybe I'll split this into two parts like I did the last one, but 30 minutes is doable. Y'all can get over it. Shout out Low Fly. Thank you for listening. Choose Jesus. If you feel led, choose him. And practice the habit of choosing him, because it's a choice. It is your choice. He is a gentleman. He will not force himself on you. Even at times where others try to, it is your choice. And your life will be better for it. That's what I believe. And in those instances where you find yourself with people that are hurting and in a broken situation without God, listen, make them feel seen, and care for them. Because I believe that that is the key to unlock the door to their heart. That is the way to allow yourself to be a vessel, to be a minister of reconciliation and a spreader of the gospel. And I think God provides ways for that to happen. I remember I was in a situation where somebody told us, it was like a retreat, God, make me more aware of the needs of others. And he will. And he did. It was a snowy day. We'd just come back from school. I was trying to park so I could go to class, and there was this girl, actually just to go back to my dorm, And there was this girl who had ice. I really just wanted her parking spot, but I helped her get the ice off of her car so she could go to work. And she asked, why would you do this? Obviously, at this point, I'm not even really caring about her car, but I'm just committed to help out. And I told her, that I was a Christian, and I invited her to my church and all that stuff. But like, did she show up? No, she didn't. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I got to be available and present and care for somebody who was in need. And yeah, I opened the door for more religious type of relationship later in that moment. But she didn't need a gospel presentation. She needed me to help her get snow off of her windshield. And that was that was my end game. Yeah, I wanted a parking spot too, but like, I prayed, God, help me be more aware of the need of others. And there was a need right there in front of me. And I had the choice to act on it or not act on it. And it wasn't up to me whether she accepted the invitation to church or Jesus or whatever. But like, I think I'm more in a space where what I want to do is create an environment for my kids one day and for a school body where they understand that Jesus, again, is going to chase you down because he pursues. He's going to knock on the door, but he's not going to force his way in. You've got to accept him. You've got to choose him and choose what comes with him in terms of what you accept and how you decide to make your walk your own. And on top of that, when you find yourself with people in a world that doesn't necessarily believe in a world where Christianity isn't the status quo, when there are tons of other religions, we see people, we hear people, and we care for them. And that's what it's about. And within all of that, we also, do the Great Commission, but I think that that's part of it. And I think that helps the Great Commission happen. Love, right? It's necessary. And if we don't have it, what are we? So, that's all I got. Shout out, Little Fly. Peace.